Hello, everyone. This is Caroline with Expat Interviews, Thriving Abroad, or more, us bringing you expats that are not just living, but thriving abroad. And I have with me today a very handsome youngin who is living his best life in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Welcome, Phil.
Ooh, hey there. How are you, Carol?
I
And
am
thank you for inviting me to the show.
My pleasure. So you are living in a very exotic country. Well, I've never been. My son had spent 3 years in living in Brazil. He fell in love with the country, and just him relating stories to me of the people, the women that he enjoyed looking at, and other things. Just the culture. It was very welcoming, and he, that's his second home. But I wanted to, I was really excited to talk with you because you are an expat who's been living outside of the US for many years. And, you and I have a lot of commonality in that, we've had to adapt and just, dig into a country. So let's kind of go to the beginning. Where are you from originally?
Wow, that's a difficult question from a lot of places because I was born in Brazil, but my family migrated or immigrated to the US when I was about 6 or 7. And then I lived the rest of my life there till about 28 or so. And then, just personal things happened with me. And then I decided, hey, it would be nice if I found out about my own culture because I always felt 100% American, very American. And that's what I did. I had a good friend of mine from New Jersey because I grew up in New Jersey, South Jersey near the Philadelphia area.
Yay!
Woohoo. And the best state in the United States.
Absolutely.
And so she was down here. She loved it. She became, as they say, a brasileira, which she just forgot that she was American. She's still here. So I was like, hey, this is a chance for me to go down. I can stay with her for a little bit till I get my stuff figured out. And that's what I did, and I've been here since I think the end of 2009 I came down, either the end of 2009 or 2010. I'm really bad with dates, but I've been here for about a decade and some change.
Okay, so it was kind of like just coming back to the familiar, unfamiliar, really.
More
Because
unfamiliar than familiar.
yeah. So was it
Uh,
easy? I mean, was it easy for you to come back after? I mean, because basically, I'm sure you don't remember a lot of your childhood. That You spent such a short time there. Was it
yeah.
easy to just, slide back into the Brazilian culture again?
Yes and no. That's the thing with Brazil. It seems like it's so similar to Western culture, to American culture. Especially São Paulo is a very metropolitan place. People call it like the New York of Brazil. So there were some things that were kind of easy to manage, but 80 to 70% of it wasn't, including the language, which really shocked me because I grew up listening to Portuguese in the house. So I had a conversational Portuguese going. So I came down very, confident in myself. And man, after a week, I was like, somebody speak English to me, please. So there's definitely things in the culture once you're immersed in it that will drive you nuts because you just expect A to go to B and instead A goes to D. And you're like, how? How did that happen? So it took me a little bit to really acclimate. I'd say like about a year, maybe even longer to say, okay, I get the Brazilian way, which is a little, it's a phrase they have here, the jeitinho brasileiro, the Brazilian way of doing things. So it's not easy. And I'm saying that as somebody that grew up in a Brazilian household. So if you're thinking of moving to Brazil and you have zero Brazilian cultural background, you really got to study up before you come down because it's not an easy country. Like Jobim, there's a famous Brazilian composer, Antonio Carlos Jobim, and his famous phrase is Brazil is not for amateurs. And it really isn't. It's something that you have to really work at and get down before you really feel comfortable in the country.
Okay, so give me an example. Like you're making it seem like you have to be New York tough to
You do.
like give me an example of some cultural things that would be kind of difficult for someone who never was exposed to the Brazilians before. I know the language I speak Portuguese from Portugal, and I know it's a different twist. The Brazilians have their little twist to it. So that would be like a little adjustment for me. I could understand. And then I speak Spanish. But tell me something that would really be like, a defining moment for me when I'd have to say, wow, yeah, I need to.
Well, there's something about, well, I already mentioned the jeitinho, which they call like the little ways, and there's something else that has a lot of prestige in Brazilian culture, which is the malandragem. Now, the malandragem can be negative and it can be positive. There's not a direct translation of it, but almost like a trickster kind of culture. I don't know if anybody knows about Native American culture. They have the coyote, the coyote's always playing tricks. He's not a bad guy or a good guy. He enjoys the fun of not doing things in a very direct way. So, especially for folks that are coming from the US or even some European countries, which we're taught from a very young age, this is how you do things, it can throw you off. Like a quick example, very common example, is just setting up a meeting with somebody. Like you and I set up a meeting for 4 o'clock, and guess what? We're both here at 4 o'clock. Uh, in Brazilian culture, I mean, don't even attempt to do something like that. Like it's very much fly by night. It's like the best times that I've had with Brazilians is just I'm kind of sitting at home bored. Hey, are you busy? No, let's go out. Boom. But then you try to do that like, hey, in 2 weeks, I have a day off. You want to get together? Forget about it. I mean, it's really tough to really set things up. Um, on one side, it can actually be really interesting and cool because you get to experience so many things in the moment. Like Brazilians seem to really live in the moment. They don't plan too much ahead. It's very free in that way. So there's a part of it which is very exhilarating, and it actually allowed me to grow as a person because I let go of some of those kind of chains of like, have to do this at 9, do this at 12, do this at 3 p.m. That's really cool about it. Can be frustrating if you're trying to do business, if you're trying to like just get serious stuff done, like fix your kitchen sink or stuff like that. It can get really frustrating. You want to kind of strangle people. But yeah, that's just part of the culture. I mean, Sao Paulo is a little bit better because it's a business center, so people are a little bit more focused. But outside Sao Paulo, it's just very like wishy-washy. Some people even say it's a bit superficial. Depending on the person, it can almost feel like that. But it's just something you got to get used to. Like Brazil is like that.
I almost feel like it's the same way in Latin America, at least the countries that I lived in. You're describing the countries that I've lived in Latin
Yeah,
America.
seems like it's a Latin
It
thing.
is, yeah, it is a Latin culture thing, and it does take some getting used to. So you have a different spin on the expat life. I mean, you are Brazilian, but did you were you accepted at first when you returned as Brazilian? I mean, just because your birth certificate says that you are. What is there classism in Brazil as far as, well, are you Afro? Are you Brazilian? Are you, was that a difficult spin for you?
It still is a difficult spin. But I'll say this one thing that's very nice about Brazilian culture is how welcoming they are. And I interviewed a lady for a little expat thing that I do too. And she's from India. And she made this great example of the difference between India and Brazil. Because in India, you could live there for 20, 30 years. She even said that there's a high minister whose wife is Italian, and they still don't consider her Indian. Whereas in Brazil, if you're here for 6 months, after you go to your first barbecue and enjoy your first beer with a group of Brazilians, you are brasileira. You are brasileiro. You just are. They are really accepting if they see that you respect their culture, respect the things that they're into. They really do accept you. Now, when you get, so it's kind of like two questions you ask. Like on that side, yes, extremely accepting culture. But there's the dark underbelly. So there's a lot of classism here, there's a lot of racism here. And I've been happy to see that since I've come to Brazil, there's been more of a growth in Black movements and Afro movements. Before, people, I wouldn't notice them calling themselves black as much nowadays, unless they were like 100%, Afro descendant, like people from Bahia, maybe. Like somebody my complexion wouldn't call themselves black in Brazil, maybe 10 years ago. So that's changed a lot, but it's still complex. It's still very complex here as far as the division between black and white. And the thing that's most infuriating is that Brazilians don't see it. Sometimes even the Afro Brazilians don't see it, that they are being discriminated against, and they don't see those invisible lines that say you have to live in the suburbs and we get to live in the rich neighborhoods and this, that, and the third. So it's a little complicated. As far as me with um, my American side, I've gotten some backlash sometimes. It's weird. I'll get some people that get angry when because I grew up in the US, like culturally, I'm American, even though I was born here. So everything that's informed my brain for 20 years, from the time I was 7 till 28, like all of my elementary, high school, college, is America. And people get a little angry with that sometimes because they're like, no, você é brasileiro. You have to stop acting like you're an American. So it's this weird thing with that. I think because outside of America, we start to realize, people don't really like America as much as America likes America. When they see America as very imperialistic and always trying to, push itself onto other countries. So you don't always get a positive outcome when you tell somebody I'm American. And especially with me, because it's like, no, but você é brasileiro. Why are you trying? Or even if I'm speaking English, and they're like, why are you speaking English? Você fala português. You speak Portuguese. So that stuff is kind of infuriating at times, but I got used to it.
Wow, that's really interesting to know that you would experience that. They're cutting my lawn, so we're going to hear the, typical Mexican noise in the background, background noise, but I hope it doesn't disturb us. So that's interesting. Okay, so what are you doing? What do you do there in Brazil?
I do a little bit of everything.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I like being in Brazil, because you were talking about the New York tough mentality, a little bit of the hustler mentality too. If you can hustle, you will do well in Brazil. Because, like I said, the country has a prestige for the malandro, right? And the malandro is that guy who can hustle too. Like, malandro can be a negative thing because he can definitely scam you and do some bad things to you. But it's also the guy that figures out a way to do stuff, that isn't necessarily illegal, but, I can get to point B somehow, some way. So if you can hustle, you'll do fine here. So primarily, because I taught in the US, so I wanted to continue teaching. I like teaching. I like anything that deals with communication. So I started out with just teaching English, but I also played music. I got my guitars in the back there. So that was something. It took a little bit longer to get into the music thing here. It's very closed, very difficult to get into the music circles here. But recently I've been able to find a really nice group of people. So I've been playing music a lot and getting paid, which is nice. I write, I vlog, that's just stuff that I do in my free time. But primarily, like, to make money is teaching and music. Those are the two main things that I do.
Now, would you say that you're in Brazil to stay? It is your home, clearly your birth home, but is this where you want to continue to live and thrive?
Well, I got a dog, so that's a sign. uh, my initial plan wasn't to do that. When I came down here, I said, okay, 5 years tops, but then I just didn't have a first 2 years that were really good or productive, because I just had to learn the hard way how to handle Brazil. Because at the time, there weren't all these Facebook groups and expat communities. So I really had to learn on my own, and I just hit my head against the wall many times. So 2 years turned into, 5 years, turned into 6, turned into 7. Then I got in a relationship. Then I broke up. Then I got a dog. And then before you know it, It's like that great John Lennon lyric, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And that's what happened. Life happened to me. I'm here, but I love Sao Paulo, and I have family here that I have adopted family, because I was adopted. So I met some biological
Oh,
family here. I have other people here that are like family, so I have like my little brothers and cousins who are they're not blood, but they're like my real family. So I've kind of built a life down here for myself. And I couldn't see myself leaving the country in the next 5 years. I can't say in 10 years. If, I went to Europe in 2015. I really loved it there. So I do have this little thing in the back of my mind saying, hey, I could really be happy in Europe. Like it's got the laid back of Brazil plus the organization of the US that I like. So I had a really good time there and plus a lot of wine. By the way, I listened to your interview with the sommelier in Paris. I was in love with her. Um,
yeah,
so
she's
I
fabulous.
know, I was like, I could live that life. I could definitely live that life. So who knows where I'll be in 10 years. But for now, I'm happy here. I'm financially doing okay for the most part. So I don't have any reason to want to just say, hey, let's start from zero somewhere else again. Like that's not something that's interesting for me right now.
What about expats? No, well, that are thinking about moving. In the next several months, I think, in my personal opinion, maybe in the next few years, a lot of people are going to be thinking about moving. It seems to be in fashion now, and someone on the fence about moving to a country. What are the pluses for moving to Brazil? If I were to start researching or pick a country, what are some of the check marks for someone that would consider moving to Brazil?
Well, we'll go back. This is like the theme of the interview, the malandro culture, like that free spirit culture that you have in Brazil. I think that's a big plus because down here, like I think to myself sometimes, okay, I could still be teaching in the US, but one, would I be making the same amount of money? Especially considering like I like to do like alternative types of teaching. Like I don't like to just sit in a classroom like an elementary school. Like that's not kind of teaching that I'm into. Could I make a decent amount of money with that? Maybe yes, maybe no, I'm not sure. But two, I think in the US, I'd also kind of be dragged into like a rat race type of scenario, even with teaching. Whereas here, I can more or less make my own schedule. I mean, that's kind of a myth, but not a myth of, making your own schedule. It's very freewheeling. You have more time for yourself to explore things about yourself that maybe you didn't know you were into. So if people are thinking about coming down first, don't just come down. I mean, unless you really are a brave spirit, I wouldn't recommend just coming down and say, hey, I'm just going to start from zero. Do 4 months, do 6 months, and then say, okay, this is the place for me. Remember, Brazil is a really big country. If you take the United States, it's like from east to west, kind of turn it that way. That's more or less the size of Brazil from north to south. It's a really big country, very different from the north to the south coast, as different as the west is from the east coast and the US and everything in the middle. So you have to research where you want to be, where you can get good internet connection, especially if you're working as a digital nomad or anything like that, working online. But there's a lot of opportunity here to be do well financially, be stable financially. You may have to downsize, but the downsizing that you're making, maybe for on the physical you're downsizing, but on the spiritual, mental life experience, you're getting an upgrade. You're getting to experience a different culture. Like I said, you have more free time, like what we're doing right now. I wouldn't find time to do this if I were in the US. I'd be like, man, it's a Tuesday at 4 o'clock. What are you talking about? Interview me, Yeah, but we can do this, So that's the plus side where you just have more time and freedom to do what you want for yourself.
That's funny. I hadn't thought about that either. You do tend to have a little bit more time when you live abroad. Yeah, life is a little slower paced. And having
Yes.
said that, do you have any final words of advice for someone, and not just moving to Brazil, but just someone who, from your experience, uh, someone that's thinking of living in a different country? What can you say from your experience? Uh, what advice can you give them? What are some of the takeaways that they should get from?
All right, I'll give you a few because that I know have worked for me. One, trust your instincts. Trust your first feeling. I've been to places in Brazil where, boom, as soon as I arrived there, I'm like, wow, I could live here. It's like you just get a feeling from a place. I've been to others where I'm like, no way in hell. I don't, I can't wait to get back home. That's fine. Trust that feeling. It's a real feeling. I think it'll be good for you if you want to choose a place to stay at long term. Two, have an escape plan. What does that mean? Save up some money, not just to go, but in case things go wrong, in case it doesn't work out, you can hop on that next plane back home. You need an escape plan. Three, learn the language. Try to learn some of the language, and have an open mind. Like, really, don't bring your wherever you're from ness to where you're going. Don't lose yourself, because I mean, if you're a New Yorker, if you're a Londoner, whatever, you got to stay a Londoner. You got to stay a New Yorker. But realize you're in a different country and try to immerse yourself in whatever those folks are into, and I think that's it, really. I mean, most important for me is just trust your gut. It'll tell you if this is the right place for you.
I
And
agree. I
yeah,
agree.
and test run though, but always test run, because tourism and living are two very different things.
Yep,
So,
that's for sure.
yeah, so got to
Last
do a
thing,
test run.
last thing I wanted to ask you, single life as opposed to coming married or with a family with children, are there different dynamics living in Brazil, or is it there's something for everyone?
Oh my goodness, that we could go on for an hour talking
Well,
about
just,
that.
I mean, just, all right, is yes or no? Yes, it's a
Definitely different
different dynamic.
dynamics. Brazilian relationships are definitely not what you're used to in any other, especially if in the US, it'll shock you, you'll cry, you'll be very happy also, but it's very different. So study up on that, on Brazilian relationships. Single life is great because people are very open, very free. I mean, I've had times when I've gone out by myself just because I was bored and I couldn't, didn't have anybody around. And I've had a good time. I can't think of once in the US that I've done that, where I've just gone out by myself and like, I'm just going to go to a bar or go to a club. In Brazil, you can. It's like very easy to make friends, even though like they may not call you the next day, but everybody's very friendly. So, like being single in Brazil is a good time, definitely.
Good, good. That's good to know. Um, Phil from Sao Paulo, Brazil, muito obrigada. Thank you so much for
Of
for sharing your story with us. I hope that others that watch will be inspired, and they will, come to enjoy what you and I have, been able to enjoy for so long. Just a cool vibe, a peaceful existence.
course.
And lots of
Definitely.
love. So thank you again. How can we connect with you if someone is looking to connect? How do we do that?
Okay, I have a few places
Are
where
you
you can.
social?
Yeah, well, social as I can be. Well, I have a few places where you can reach me. On Instagram, I'm at São Paulo Tours. That's SaoPaulo, São Paulo Tours. And you'll see a bunch of pictures of São Paulo. And every once in a while, when foreigners come down here, I take them on little mini tours of São Paulo. So
Okay,
you can
good.
reach me on IG there. And also Phil Ray Music, if you want to hear some of my music. That's Instagram also.
Definitely. Yeah.
And on
Get all your plugs in. Go ahead. This
I
is
got to. I got to. And on YouTube, I'm at Phil in Brazil. So I've been able to get it so you can just put YouTube and then put the little slash and put Phil in Brazil and you'll get there. And I do have a little series called the Brazil Expat Journal where I interview expats in Brazil. And I also do movie reviews on Monday if you're into that. So those are like the three main ways you can reach me. Sao Paulo Tours, Phil Ray Music on Instagram, and then Phil in Brazil on YouTube.
Phil in Brazil, once again, thank you. I appreciate you. And I look forward to going through some of your life in Brazil. Thank you for sharing a little bit of that with us. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. This was awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.